Well, I apologise for the lack of content recently. This is mostly just due to the ridiculous amount of construction and chainsawing noises literally everywhere. Anywhere I go at the moment, I've had absolutely no luck with getting any usable audio from anything. But if you've been following the channel recently, you'll know that I've been very excited about the Panasonic Lumix S5II and was planning to replace my OM1 with it. So I finally went to an open day event at WEX, a UK camera retailer, which was very nice. They got lots of different camera makers and stuff there, and I finally got to spend some real time with the S5II. And so anyway, here's my new Fuji X-H2S. So yes, considering that I've never mentioned anything about the Fuji X-H2S, I think, on this channel, this is probably a bit of a weird change of direction, but it kind of makes sense, and really it is rooted in the fact that I found a fairly crippling bug in the S5II, which means that it won't work for wildlife photography. I had a chance to try it for the first time about a week ago, and I tested out the sort of normal things that I would do with the camera, and I noticed that there was something a little bit odd with the electronic burst mode, in that it felt like it had a bit of a lag in it, which would be irritating if so, and I thought maybe it's tied to things like release priority, or maybe it's tied to the lens that's attached to it. It turns out it's not, and there is a bug in the electronic burst mode on the S5II. Obviously I don't have an S5II with which to demonstrate this, and I didn't film in the store because it was a very busy event. But the general gist of it is that if you use the electronic burst mode set to 30 FPS, you use the AF on button to perform your autofocus, and you then press the shutter button to start the burst, and it works, it's fine. Then you release the shutter button, but you're still holding the autofocus button. This is something that's very common with wildlife photography if you use back button autofocus, and you then press the shutter button again, it won't take any photos. In fact, it will never take any photos until you release both the buttons again, give it a couple of seconds, and then do that again. It's definitely a bug. It can't be an intentional fault with the camera, but unfortunately, I can't buy cameras based on potential future bug fixes or firmware upgrades. So I did speak to the Panasonic rep while I was there. I detailed the bug and he could reproduce it very reliably. So he wrote it down and he's going to forward that back to Panasonic. So hopefully they'll fix it in a future firmware upgrade. It doesn't seem to be something that anybody else has picked up on YouTube so far. I don't think that the target market for this camera, which is probably vloggers and videographers, will ever really encounter this bug. But for people who are using it as a hybrid camera, it is a bug and it's quite irritating. However, this did illustrate some other problematic areas with the S5II, mostly around the burst shooting mode. So one of my justifications for getting the camera was that even though its mechanical burst is quite poor at about 7 FPS with autofocus, a 30 FPS electronic shutter mode would offset that, because a lot of the photos I take, I do need a fairly rapid burst, but they're not necessarily things that will be affected by poor readout speed or anything like that. So I figured that that would work for me. But the actual experience of shooting a burst on it is quite laggy. Like, even putting aside the bug, it doesn't feel immediate. It's not like shooting electronic burst mode on the X-H2S or the OM1 is. It does feel more like the 6K photo mode of the first generation Panasonic S5. Another aspect of it that was kind of odd, and something that I'm not necessarily sure that they're going to implement, is that there is no way of dialing down the speed of the burst mode. So in most of these faster cameras that offer fast electronic burst modes, so like the X-H2S and the OM1, you can choose to lower their maximum burst speed. So rather than shooting in 40 FPS on this, you can shoot 20, or you can shoot 15, or anything like this. You can dial it back, which is good, because then if you've got a limited buffer size, you get more shots in that buffer, and you don't necessarily always need the fastest frame rate. You're going to throw away a lot of those photos. Unfortunately, in the S5II, you can't adjust it. It's just 30 FPS. And that leaves your options as 7 FPS or 30. And I kind of want to be around 15 to 20. So aside from the issues that I found with the burst shooting modes, the camera is very nice to use. It operates very similarly to the S5, and it's a camera I like. And the autofocus is very good. The actual ability to lock onto people is great. So if you are using it as a sort of an everyday camera rather than an action camera or a video and vlogging camera, I have no doubt that you'd be very happy with it. It's an excellent camera. But for me, it just doesn't suit my purposes right now. And I don't think Panasonic are quite prepared to go in that direction yet. I think they are still focusing on the video market right now. And although that will benefit wildlife photographers in the long run, I just get that that's not quite their focus yet. So yes, for anyone who's been following along up until this point, the Fuji X-H2S might look like a bit of a weird choice because it's only got a maximum ISO of 12,800, and the 150 to 600 lens, which is the wildlife lens I've ordered for this, is f8 at its fullest extent, which isn't very bright. But it does have some advantages, and one of them is the weird way in which Fuji cameras seem to handle noise. They tend to look kind of nice. It's quite weird. I did some testing in the store, shooting raw, turning down any noise reduction that was there, and taking photos of very vibrant, colourful areas, underexposing them, stuff like that. And the photos look fine. They don't seem to degrade their colour, and that's always been my biggest concern. And the problem that I've had with the IM1 is at high ISO and when it's underexposed, it loses colour data quite badly. And I don't believe that this camera will do that. So I'm hopeful. I've tested it in the store, but there's a limit to what you can do in the store, so we'll see in the real world. I don't expect it to be worse than the IM1, so I guess that's a plus. But there are some other reasons why I went for this camera. I like Fuji. I really like the way they make stuff. I've always liked the Fuji cameras that my dad uses, for example. I don't like their menu systems. Those are completely insane, and they're very, very bizarre. But the cameras themselves are really pleasant to use, and they've got some really interesting lens options. This camera in particular has fantastic video capabilities, and that's one of the things that I wanted from the S5II, because I have been starting to make YouTube videos, obviously, as you're currently watching one, and what I want to do is make more videos about birds and about animals and things like that that require me to get good footage of said birds and animals. And with the IM1, I've not really been able to do that so far. There's been a couple of reasons why that's the case. One is that the autofocus is a little bit bizarre in video mode. You have to have object detection with tracking on, and it does weird things. I find that it's a bit weird in terms of its focusing in general in video mode. It doesn't seem to be quite as locked on as I would like on a jittery animal. And there is a bug in the IM1 tied to the image stabilizer when you're initializing video. So every time I start filming a video clip, I have to toggle image stabilization off and then back on before it will stabilize the video correctly, which is very irritating after a while. So I'm hopeful that that's not going to be a problem on the Fuji system. But yes, one of the main reasons that I've chosen to change to this instead is that I also want to take other photos, and it's the reason why I was looking at the S5II as well, is I love the photo quality of the S5 for landscapes and for people and travel photos and things like that. And I love Fujifilm for that too. And with the latest firmware update for the X-H2S, I'm hoping that I'll love it for wildlife photography as well. It seems like a very capable camera. The focus, when I tested it in the store, was excellent. It tracked my test subject very effectively. So I am quite hopeful for that aspect, but the nice thing with Fuji cameras is that the other sorts of photos are also very pleasing, and I'm looking forward to experimenting with that and taking some different types of photos that I don't normally take. So yes, I don't have any lenses yet. In theory, they're turning up tomorrow. They weren't in stock in the shop at the time. But hopefully I will be able to get out and start taking photos and video with it soon. Currently, I'm just sat here turning it on and off quite a lot and trying to understand the menus, which are pure chaos. They are quite powerful actually, but settings that you expect to be there are hidden weirdly in alternative ways of getting into menus, and strange things are listed under user setting, and some of the menu system just has emoji for settings and the text changes size everywhere. It's really weird. That's definitely something it doesn't have over the Panasonic cameras, where the menu system actually makes sense. Hopefully over this weekend my lenses will turn up and I can get out and take some footage and some shots with the X-H2S. I'm sure the weather will be terrible, as is tradition. But thank you very much for watching. Until next time.